In 2024, the Atlanta Falcons offense was average. And what that means is that they've got the opportunity to grow in a few key areas to push them into that elite tier of offenses. And when looking back at this team, one area really stuck out to me, and that was the red zone offense. The Falcons, for the most part, were a below average red zone offense. They didn't necessarily excel or dominate in any one area, and you couldn't really point to anything that they did exceptionally well in that part of the field. And don't get me wrong, the team was not terrible. They were obviously able to get by, and it's almost remarkable how they were able to survive without doing some things that we see a lot of other offenses do to make that part of the field a little bit more manageable. And we're going to get into that and discuss more why. But first, we're going to kind of talk about the Falcons' running offense and what did that look like in the red zone and what was Zac Robinson asking of his team. Zac Robinson really wanted to be able to run out of the gun last year. He was very attached to his 11 personnel roots from his time with the Rams, and we didn't really see that change much throughout the season. The Falcons were a very 11 personnel dominant team. And so what this meant a lot of times is that Robinson was going to ask Bijan Robinson to beat the unaccounted for man in the box. In this situation, you have the Falcons with 6 blockers, 5 down linemen, plus Charlie Warner, and you're going to see that the Eagles have 6, 7 in the box. And so leaving Bijan with a one-on-one isn't necessarily a bad plan. It's usually a recipe for success. Robinson can often make that guy miss. But in the red zone, this is a little bit more of a difficult ask. Everything's moving a little bit faster, and if those blocks don't develop right away, a lot of these run plays can just kind of be dead in the water. And unfortunately, that's really what happened a lot of times for the Falcons last year. They really relied on Bijan magic to kind of make things happen. Here, again, we're going to see Tyler Algier being asked to do the same thing and beat the unaccounted for man, but the Falcons just aren't able to win that initial battle and get the push that they need. One of the reasons could be that the Falcons just weren't really great at running inside their wide zone dominant scheme, and we didn't really see them go away much from that last year. But whenever the Falcons tried to do something a little bit different, it just never really went their way. And something else that likely affected the run game was the lack of play action. When you're in this part of the field, any little bit of misdirection, any bit of edge you can get against a defense is going to help you out. And you're going to see here that the Buccaneers really did not respect Kirk Cousins or any of the boot action that would come from this kind of player handoff. This is going to be number 54. You're going to see him come down, blitz hard. He's not even going to look back here and take a peek at Kirk or anything like that, because at this point in the year, they know Kirk Cousins just is not a threat, and that play action for some reason is missing from the Falcons playbook. And we saw the Falcons even try to do a Tyler Algier fullback-esque package, and this quickly went away because Tyler Algier is not a fullback, he's a running back. And that's nothing against Tyler Algier, that's just knowing your personnel. That's a difficult ask for him, and the Falcons were essentially just trying to beat their head into the wall and run as much as they can, and they didn't really do anything to get creative in this first half of the season. And luckily, they have number 7, who's able to make plays like this. You're not going to find many running backs in the league who can land on one foot, pull off the acrobatics necessary, and fall into the end zone. And that's why they took number 7, number 8. He's special. It's also important to remember that this is Zac Robinson's first year as a play caller, and play callers traditionally struggle in the red zone, especially in year 1, and Z-Rob was no different. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me about Robinson was that his game flow was just a little bit off at times, and in this example, Bijan Robinson's going to be asked to run a jet sweep, but we're running it to the short side of the field instead of toward all this open grass. Personally, just not really a fan of this, and I also think that, Bijan is a little bit better just being able to get north and south than he is being asked to run those jet sweeps. Not that he can't run them, he showed us many times that he could. But other things that Robinson did that were just a little bit questionable was asking players like Ray McCloud to do a little bit more than maybe they should have been asked. And so Ray McCloud was a gem for the Falcons last year. He's a great offseason signing, very low budget, exceeded the expectations, I think, but when coming in. But the problem is that Robinson started to lean on McCloud just a little too much. And here he's going to ask him to make a very difficult block, and it does not go the team's way. And that's because he was asking him to solo all-pro safety Derwin James. That's a difficult block for most players in the league. Ideally, Charlie Warner is handling that. If it has to be a wide receiver, Drake London is the person that I would trust the most in this situation. But Robinson did this handful of times last year, and it just wasn't really the best thing for the team. And the player just was not put in the best position to succeed. And so that's something that's going to need to change this year. And the Falcons struggled with a couple of other miscues and issues as well in the red zone. Mental mistakes in the red zone can spoil all of the hard work that went into getting there in the first place. And unfortunately for the Falcons, that happened a number of times last year. The Falcons had 12 penalties total in the red zone, and that accounted for 12% of all of their penalties last season. One of which, unfortunately, wiped off a touchdown against their heated rivals, the New Orleans Saints. And you simply cannot afford to give up points in this league. But it wasn't just penalties. There was also questionable decision-making happening at the quarterback position. Luckily, the Falcons only had 2 turnovers, but there were a lot of incomplete passes or lame ducks thrown that just weren't really wise decisions and also hurt/killed the offense. And at times, things just seemed out of sorts. Like this play, for example, we're going to see Kyle Pitts get motioned out wide here, and we see that this corner goes with him. Just off the bat, it looks like we're going to have some kind of off coverage here. Let's see what happens. So we see, boom, okay, the corner stays back. He clearly is not covering this flat, and it looks like Drake London's probably going to be running a corner route here. This is something the Falcons did a lot. It seemed like it was going to be a just traditional smash route concept. Pitts ends up cutting inside like he's running a slant. He somewhat pulls up, and I think it's because he sees that the defender is sitting there waiting for him. When we look at the bottom of this screen, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. This doesn't look like ideal route spacing to me. I can't tell if somebody's right, somebody's wrong. Ray McCloud just kind of stops in his tracks. But the bigger thing is up here with Kyle Pitts, and it made me wonder, what kind of freedom do the Falcons receivers have, and what kind of trust do they have with their quarterback? Last year, it didn't look like there was a lot. Things seem to be pretty rigid. In the NFL, a lot of times, guys will have option routes, and they'll be asked to make reads on the field. If Kyle Pitts sees that he has a corner that's playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yards off of him, instead of running in towards coverage, he really should just sit here and wait for the football. It would be a much better outcome than running straight into coverage and then Kirk Cousins throwing straight into coverage. There was just no need for any of that here. But for some reason, and maybe it was that the Falcons just did not trust their receivers to that level. Maybe they just felt like it wasn't needed, or maybe Pitts made the bad read on this play. I'm not sure, but at times things just didn't look very smooth or very clean. And here's another example with Drake London and Ray McCloud. We're going to see a levels concept, which is the Falcons trying to create a high-low situation. And so we're basically going to see one receiver down on this plane of the field, and then you're going to see another up here, and then we're trying to create this space with the defense. And so when the Falcons go out, everything's fine at first, but the big issue starts with Drake London up top. So if you pay close attention, we're going to be able to see that our line to gain is right here. Drake London is well past the line to gain, so really he should start coming down flat here. Kirk Cousins is looking to get the first down. This is a third down play. Ray McCloud is well short of the first down marker. And I think that's okay in this situation because I don't think he's really where this ball should be going. Ideally, I think it should be going to London. Unfortunately, London carries that route a little bit further up than he needs to, gets a little sloppy, and now he can't really get this ball thrown to him. Kirk has already had to make a decision to go to Mooney because this route took so long and Drake London is up here. And unfortunately, the Falcons are just not able to convert. Ray makes a very tough catch, but it's short. And so when we look at some of the things that Atlanta needs to do, it's clear that they just need to be a little bit more sound, a little bit more competent. And Zac Robinson and this team has had time to work on those things. And let me reiterate, this was not a terrible red zone offense. The Falcons did do a lot of things really well, and they're going to be able to build off of those things and I think make them even better when we look at 2025. And one of those things is the usage of Charlie Woerner. The Falcons really started to figure out that he is going to be the key piece that makes this offense go. And we're going to see why here. This is a split zone spinner concept. We're going to see Woerner come across the formation. He's going to do a little movement here and then come back here and then kick out these defenders to make a beautiful block that leads to a Tyler Algier touchdown. And it's basically, you know, how you simulate having a fullback. And something else that we really like here is that we're in 12 personnel. The Falcons were allergic to 12 personnel last year. They ran it at the 30th. They were ranked 30th in terms of run rate with it, and they were dead last in EPA when in it. And I think that's just because they never really figured out how they wanted to do this, because Zac Robinson never really intended on using a lot of it in the first place. But we started to see flashes of it, and we started to see number 8 really show up as a blocker. When we look back at this play again, just watch Kyle Pitts and what he's able to do, and why I say he can function as a backside tight end and maybe even sometimes on the front of those rushing concepts. And we already know the biggest difference is going to be number 9. He is able to strike and attack this red zone very differently than Kirk Cousins was. And Kirk Cousins, you know, for all of his faults last year, still did a pretty good job, but he wasn't able to offer this. And that's the difference between Penix and Cousins, is the ability to deliver that ball through a window that very few quarterbacks can. And the other thing that we like about this is that we're not asking Kyle Pitts to run a little slant route from the outside in the red zone. Now at this point in the season, we've figured out, hey, we want Kyle Pitts to get vertical because that's when he wins. And lo and behold, Kyle Pitts wins his route here. And that is something that was really promising to see, seeing all of the growth from Robinson as the year went on. And the other guy that we need to talk about is Drake London, who is probably, you know, one of the biggest red zone threats that has not been fully unleashed or untapped, because he is a monster when it comes to winning contested catches. This is just one of the most craziest throwing catches you'll see of last season. And you have an understanding of why the Falcons are so excited, why they truly believe that this offense can take it to the next level. And the biggest difference this year is going to be what Penix offers with these. That's right, his legs. Now, a lot of people believe Michael Penix, you know, is very stagnant. He's only a pocket passer. And look, you know, for the most part, yeah, Penix is going to be at his best when he's dealing from the pocket. But having a quarterback who can just threaten this and has the sack avoidance and ability to make plays with his feet in this short area of the field is very critical, and it's just another threat that the defense has to account for. And so the Falcons have some very, very good foundational pieces that they can build off of to improve this red zone offense going into 2025. And I'm hoping they looked across the league, because there's a couple of things that they could steal from to make this just a little bit much better that was missing from the offense last year. Something that really excites me about this Falcons offense is the fact that Bijan Robinson is still not reaching his full potential. And that sounds crazy to say after a season in which he had 1,800 yards from scrimmage, but it's true. And the area that he can take the next step is as a receiver. And it's going to be on Zac Robinson to give him those opportunities. And there's a lot of examples across the league that he can take from to do that. And I think the first one that, we should look at is, Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit. And Detroit did a really good job of utilizing Jahmyr Gibbs. And we're going to see here, they ask him to run a simple Texas route. If you play Madden, you probably spam this route. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to threaten like he's running here to the flat, and then he's going to cut inside. What this does is it takes advantage of this defender's momentum, creates a nice opening, and it's going to be some quick points for Jared Goff. Quick hitting passing concept, which is what you want in the red zone. And again, we're going to see another example here. It doesn't always have to be a hard angle across the formation. And depending on who you have, you can ask these players to make a read. We're going to see Gibbs again take the same step until he gets to the line of scrimmage. He's threatening like he's going to run out here, but instead of coming back across the formation at an angle this way, he's going to cut up and get vertical once he realizes that there is all this open space. And this is just letting a football player do what they do best. And if you notice, you're going to see the lines here are in 11 personnel, motioning out their tight end. This is exactly how the Falcons like to have their offense look and personnel grouping when they're in the red zone, so you don't have to change much in order to get these things across. The next thing here is just a fun way, I think, to get multiple running backs on the field at once. The Falcons, they just really struggled, and they weren't able to come up with a dynamic package that had both Bijan and Tyler on the field. If you're looking for a game where they had the most success with a two running back group, it'd probably be the Minnesota Vikings game. But here, the Dolphins do a really good job getting creative, motioning Alec Ingold out of the backfield, who is a fullback, but in this instance, this is something that, Algier could do. This isn't a traditional fullback play or block. So they're going to put Ingold out here in space, and then they're basically going to have him be a lead blocker for A-Chain on this swing. Ingold does just enough to throw that DB off of his tackling path, and A-Chain's able to skip in for an easy touchdown. And so those are just some of the things that the Falcons can do to get Bijan, more involved as a passer. But when we look at how can they improve the run game, the easiest thing to me in my mind comes back to how they manage this tight end room. This year, the Falcons are carrying 4 tight ends. They only had 3 last year. And it looked like they made a real effort to remake that room. They got Ross Dwelly out, and then they brought in Team Quarantino, who in my opinion is a much better all-around tight end. I think he's going to be the one that's going to be asked to be the next blocking tight end behind Charlie Warner. And if that plan works, the Falcons are going to have, a lot of opportunities, in my opinion, to have a better heavy package and to just be a little bit more dynamic of an offense. So here you're going to see that the Niners actually run away from George Kittle, and they're running behind Eric Saubert. If that name sounds familiar to you, that is because he's a former Falcon who was drafted by Atlanta in the 5th round. He did not work out here, but it's funny how things just happen. Sometimes a change of scenery helps. And so the 49ers, they're able to get into 12 personnel pretty much, whenever they want and be very efficient at it. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, it's Kyle Shanahan's 49ers. Of course they're good at running 12 personnel, this, that, and the other. But, just really important information is that they actually ran 12 personnel at a lower rate than the Falcons. The Falcons ran it 30th. They were 31st. And like I said earlier, the Falcons were dead last in EPA. And that's where the difference is the 49ers were 9th when out of 12 personnel, which basically meant that they were able to get almost anything they wanted when they switched to that personnel group. They're not limited to just 11 or whatever. And that's what the Falcons are going to need to do if they really want to push this offense into that next tier. You can't just be really good at running out of 11 personnel. You need to be good at running it out of any personnel grouping so that the defense is always on its toes. Last year, defenses just didn't really have to prepare for a lot. And one of the other things that kind of goes hand in hand with that is just the lack of play action. The Falcons ran 3 play action plays total in the red zone, which is a jarring statistic because the red zone is probably one of the best places to utilize play action. Defenses are reacting so much faster. They're going off of the first thing they see. It's one of the best ways to take advantage of their momentum and the aggressive play style that happens in the red zone. And if Zac Robinson does not implement any part of the play action offense that should be going off of the wide zone or whatever scheme they plan on running, then the team is going to be in trouble. But I'm very optimistic that we're going to see a Falcons offense, especially a Falcons red zone offense, that is far more dynamic than the one we saw last year. Zac Robinson now has a year of play calling under his belt, and he is more comfortable with his personnel, and I think he has a better understanding of what everybody can do, and they made a real effort to go out and get the guys that they just didn't have last year to fill in for some of those smaller key roles that don't always pop into mind, like your third tight end. So I have a really optimistic outlook for what this Falcons offense could be, but especially this red zone offense as we lead into 2024. I appreciate everybody who stayed along and watched this video. This is Tre'Shon Diaz signing off from the very first episode of All Tre Phases.